Converge? No, not Converge? All right. Well, somebody had to run the AV equipment. Thanks for coming out. You guys are from small, medium businesses?
Probably medium business, like maybe 120 users.
Okay. Yeah, that's like right where I've been for 15 years, is like between 100 and 200 users.
Yeah.
And we've got kind of a unique flavor to what we do because...
He's more 5,000 users.
Okay, cool. Well, it's fun talking to people from a lot of different backgrounds because they all have a different viewpoint on things, right? And for me, I've always kind of been either by myself or with maybe one or two other people. So we wear a lot of hats. You guys know how this is. You're doing everything. You're not just doing security. You're unjamming the printer. Because we can put a man on the moon, but we can't put a dead tree through a printer, you know? So you're spending all your time putting out fires like that. You don't really have a lot of time for security, so how do you fit it in? How do you make things work in that kind of environment? If anybody came to see Stephen Legg's presentation, anybody? Awesome, because we have a lot of overlap. As I'm sitting in the back, I'm like, oh, this sucks. We've got like 3 or 4 of the same slides, but they dovetail a little bit, and where he went into a lot of tools, I kind of go into a lot more process and a little bit of background on the CMM, which we'll talk about in a minute. So it's kind of cool. So again, I'm not going to talk about a lot of tools. It's more of like a roadmap, how you start your framework to get your process up and running. So like I said, for 15 years, I've been running a small IT shop. It's usually just me. And when you come to these conferences, there's a ton of good information. You know, really good high-level stuff, down in the dirt, like hacker stuff. It's all a lot of fun. But at the same time, what do you start with? Are you going to go home and run after a SIM? Are you going to go put in an IDS, a new firewall? Is your VPNs aren't good enough? You know, there's a ton of information, and you got to kind of digest it and make use of it. And that's kind of the challenge for the small and medium businesses. Not a lot of time for security tasks. No budget sometimes for security tasks. That's kind of turning around right now because there's a lot of big news stories. You know, Target, everybody knows, everyone's heard about that, so we get a little bit more budget in that end, hopefully. So what I'm going to present is just a framework I use. It's pretty simple. Lead your efforts, help you make smart decisions, smart budgetary decision, not chasing after every new product that comes along, letting vendors pickpocket you constantly because they want to. You guys all know that. I'm not going to go into a lot of tools. There's a ton of good stuff, good material already today on good places to get tools. So my background for this is, even though I've been running small IT shops, I wear a lot of hats. So I help operations a lot. I actually ran operations at my previous company for probably 2 years total out of that 15, where I was doing IT, but I was also running operations. So I got into a lot about ISO and process improvement, Kaizen. So a lot of what I do has that flavor to it, where I'm not going to just run after a tool, kind of make it part of the process so that you can follow up on it, make it work. The CMM. If you've had the displeasure of drinking with me, you probably heard me talk about this too much. So this is the part that Steve didn't really go into, but this is like the core of what I try to do a lot. And at the bottom here, in the ad hoc area, this is the bottom, this is chaos, which isn't always a bad thing. If you've got a startup, you've got a small company, you're growing fast, you're doing a lot of things, you're doing them really quick, but you might not have processes on how you do those things. So that's chaos down here. And then at the very top, you've got really strong processes, you're feeding back into those processes your lessons learned, and you're continuously improving. In the middle is where most of us probably are. So right here, I call that like the script kiddie area. So you've got processes maybe written for you. You've got a little IT helper who's got a checklist of how to set up a user, right? But you've only got that one process. So you're not completely documented. You may be a little bit off the script a lot of times. If you've got to do something really fast, you're not going through that record every time, and there's no follow-up to see if you went through that checklist all the way. So that's kind of the scope of the CMM. So what this helps you do, if you kind of subscribe to the CMM, is you're going to slowly improve your security posture. You're not going to leave here and buy all the things and fix all the things and have perfect security. You've got to make that dedication over time to improve it. So one of the important things, if you're in automotive especially, and I was for years, is documentation for ISO. That's the biggest thing for ISO, is you got to document everything. Even if your documentation sucks, you got to document it. Which is, again, going back to the CMM, if you document it and it sucks and you're not ever going to use it, this is kind of where you are. You're not using your documentation, your process isn't built to use the documentation, but you still write it, just because you're paying lip service to ISO. And that's kind of a waste of time. Everybody knows this. Who's written documentation that no one's ever going to use? Oh, yeah. Yeah, documentation. Document all the things. So, why do we need a framework, even if it is a simple one? Why do we need one? Because feelings. We've got a lot of feelings. The vendors, they show us shiny boxes with blinking lights, and we feel like we really need that. Do we really need it? Maybe. It's probably a good product. They tell me it's a good product. But guess what? Your feelings are shit. So my framework kind of goes in and it maps what we do to the SANS Top 20. Everyone's heard of the SANS Top 20? Raise your hand. It's kind of staring off into space. That's cool. SANS Top 20 is kind of one of the most recognized ways to improve your security posture. And there it is. And this is pretty much my whole framework. Like I said, it's really silly, really easy. So we've got all the SANS controls in a spreadsheet. It's just Excel. And I start off with an impact, or how much this is going to impact your environment if something goes wrong in that area. So, inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices, right? That's right up at the top. If somebody puts a box onto your network, what can they do? Everything. Maybe. If you don't have it locked down, they can do everything. So is that really important? Yeah, it probably should be an impact, probably 9, 8. And what's your control? How strong are your controls? And you rank yourself on all of this. So like I said, it's really easy. You put in your control number. So for me, I don't know what I put here, probably like a 7 or a 6. It wasn't real high, but we do have decent controls. We keep empty ports unplugged, that kind of stuff. So we do have a list of our actual inventory. And then the subtotal. The subtotal is calculated off of these first two numbers, so they all start the same thing. So you self-rank yourself. You put all your controls, all your impacts. Impacts are high, controls start low. So if you don't really have a lot of control, you start at 1. If it doesn't really have an impact, you start at 1. And then you invert one of the fields to get your relative threat. And then you sort it. What pops up at the top? That's probably the most important. So really, the first time I did it, it took me probably 2 hours to put together because I really thought about it. I went over the SANS list and saw how does this affect me? Is it important? And then what do I have in there to control it? Because a lot of times we don't even remember what we have in there to control it. Like, do I have an inventory list? No, I don't have a sheet of a list. Maybe I have a product. Like for us, it's bit 9. Every one of my computers is in bit 9. Now I have an inventory list. That's pretty much everything on my network. So you've got to think about it, what you actually have that covers these areas. So for me, the biggest relative threat was maintenance, monitoring, and analysis of audit logs. So I got a 45 there. Is a 45 good or bad? Who cares? It's at the top. That's what you should go after. This is really important, and it's not just in security, it's in everything in IT. Like I said, I'm more of a generalist, so I kind of have a list for everything, and I regularly go revisit that list. I have a month-end document that I go over. It's got a lot of silly stuff. I reboot our MFPs because they crash all the time. Yeah, I restart our generators. I restart our generators just to make sure they're still running, they still have gas. Who has a month-end list that they go over? Something they look at. Maybe it's not even month-end, maybe it's quarterly. But I think it's crazy important that there's a couple tasks that you're always looking at. And it doesn't have to be an Excel sheet. Maybe it's built into something a little bit larger. You know, it's part of operations, so it sends you an email. For me, it's just a Word document. I've got a list, and every time something goes wrong, I think, if it was on this list, would I have been able to check it? would I have been able to prevent whatever this was that went wrong if it was on this list? The example of the generators. You get a power outage that takes down the company maybe every 2-3 years. That's probably a lot, but that's how it goes. And you had that power outage and you figured out you have no idea where your generators are. You left them with maintenance. What happened to them? So now you're down. Your UPS is going to last you 30 minutes, and then it's blackout. What happened to them? Do they have gas? If you're on your list and you're actually checking your list, maybe you know. So, in review, have a process. That's kind of the most important. And that checking that list once a month or once quarterly is part of that process. Rank the impact and current controls, and this is a self-rank, but you got to take a look at it, be brutal. You're probably the only one who's going to look at this list. Maybe you share it with your team. Maybe use it as a metric. So at the end of the year, if you're keeping versions of this list, you can go back and say, hey, these are all the changes I made, and now it's in this list that I update all the time, so I can show my list to my higher-ups and say, hey, look at these are the things we took care of. Our threat went from 30 to 20. What does that mean? Not too much, but it went down. That's the good thing, right? And then add more controls. Figure out what maps to your SANS line items, what's going to help you improve your security posture on those SANS items. Put them in there. Maybe it takes a couple times. This is a long process. Like I said, you can't jump out of this meeting and go save the world. It's going to take a lot of time. Level up. Keep going up to CMM until you're right here at the top. You're with world-class organizations that really know how to create processes. And this doesn't have to be just for security. You can use this process and this growth for anything in your IT infrastructure. If you're in a small business, you can use it for a lot of things. That's it. There's only a couple of us here, so I know we probably still have a lot of time. Like 5-10 minutes.
Well, I was just going to make.
Yeah.
Just real quick, I would argue this is also for small offices too, not just small businesses, because you're not going to have a nag necessarily in an office with more people. Your CFO's not going to buy one. Yep. So you have to look at other approaches. I'm going to say the simple thing like this and have reports all the time.
Yep. And if that's on your list, once a year. That one I probably wouldn't do that often because it sucks.
Right, yeah.
But you've got to go through, make sure your ports that aren't connected to anything. I kind of just go through my switch, and if it's got lights out, I write it down. I come back 2 weeks later, I write it down again. If it comes up in that list twice, I unplug it. It's just quick and easy, and we've only got 120 ports, so it doesn't take that long.
For small businesses that have shoestring budget, how do you go about, or what's your opinion on balancing between products that you actually do buy and stuff like open source, things like that?
I don't make those decisions whenever possible. You look at the options. You may have a product that's completely free and versus one that costs a lot of money. So you've got QRadar versus Alien Ball. What are the pros and cons? What's going to take you more time? And you take that up the chain. Who's your higher up? You make them make the decision. A lot of times we're not making the decisions, especially on expenses. We're making the guidance. And when it's a really expensive thing, that's just how it's going to be. You're not going to be able to spend the $50,000. So, if people higher up think it's important, then you do it. If they don't, try to find something cheaper that they will go with. My only small business guy right here. What do you think?
I basically agree with you. Yeah. I'm in a technology company, and you would think that most people would understand technology, but they don't.
Or they don't have time to understand it.
Yeah.
They've got other things going on.
We don't do a good enough job trying to educate people on security. I find you win small battles, you lose small battles. I totally agree with you. That security decisions, your you're basically telling other people, here are the risks, here are the benefits, here are the products, make the choice.
And a lot of times we want to make the choice because we want
Of course you want to make the choice.
we
Yeah.
want to move it along. We may have strong opinions about it one way or another, but at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to sleep at night if the wrong decision gets made. You got to look at it from that angle.
It's hard to resist.
Because your pager's always going off, right? Yes, sir.
So you have this, this framework which you try to follow. I assume you share this framework with your higher ups. What is their opinion on something like this? Share this with higher ups, or people that do make the decision, and how they feel about that?
To them, it's a metric, and one that most of the time they're not especially concerned with. So I'll present it to them regularly to say, hey, this is what we're doing in this area. But it's kind of with everything else. This is what we're doing on the network end. Phone system. These are the upgrades we're making in security. So it's just another number. If it's staying stale for a long time, they might say something about it. A lot of times I present it to them on demand, so it's triggered from them. They say, oh my gosh, Target, what are we doing? This is what we're doing. This is where we need help. How can you help me? Can you approve these things at the top? These are my controls. That if I put them in place, it's going to help us. So from the larger business side, how do you guys handle the process at the lower level like that, like guiding what you're doing?
And that's, we actually do a lot of CMM type approaches because you usually are inheriting something that somebody else created. There may be chaos, so you have to regularize it and so forth. The difference is the scale. We have over 1,000 virtual machines we have to deal with. So you have to break down the problem in a simpler task, otherwise it'll never get done. You'll just overwhelm and like, I can't deal with it. I'll look at something else that I can get my endorphins on and think I'm making a difference, but they're ignoring the larger problem. So unfortunately, I have to a lot of times prod. This is a difficult problem, but if you break it up and achieve it, I need to make some progress on it. So a lot of my job is sometimes being a taskmaster, but realizing that if you make these somewhat difficult decisions and scale them to 1,000 VMs and so forth, we can make a very meaningful difference.
Right.
What we try to do is achieve transparency so that we're not putting too many barriers in our work teams. We're a very creative company, and that's very difficult. Finding the right tools takes a lot of time. What we're finding is we'll chew through a tool and realize it's useless and get rid of it, but a lot of times they don't come out in the evaluation. So going to conferences like this and what other people are doing is also very valuable. You need a lot of peer discussion if you're talking at scale.
Yep.
You just believe vendors.
Yeah, the products that people talk about up here are very useful. But I can honestly say, coming to these conferences, the biggest thing I take away is inspiration. It's a kick in my ass to get going. And that's where I think all the value is. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bridget.